Dragon Age Origins was rated M for mature by the ESRB and contains blood, intense violence, language, partial nudity, and sexual content. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone, my name is Amaronith and I play games for the internet. And today we're playing Dragon Age Origins and I'm reading more Codex Entries. We have more in creatures, items, magic and religion, history and culture, characters, books, and songs. Creatures, Article 5. Bear. No beast is more beloved by Dirthamen than the bear. When the world was new, Dirthamen gave one secret to each creature to keep. The foxes traded their secrets to Anduril for wings. The hares shouted theirs to the treetops. The birds sold theirs for gold and silver. Only the bears kept Dirthamen's gift deep within their dens. They slept the months away in the company of their secrets and nothing else. When Dirthamen discovered what had been done with his gifts, he snatched the wings from the foxes, silenced the voices of the hares, and turned the birds into paupers. But the bears he honored for their steadfastness. Transcribed from a Dalish tale, 9-8 Dragon. Normally, it is almost unheard of for bears to attack travelers. They are, in fact, so shy and so inactive during the day that most people never encounter a bear at all. However, should a bear be provoked, they are remarkably dangerous. The normally placid-seeming creatures become enraged and can strike massive blows with their paws, capable of knocking a man off his feet. Article 16. Hurlock. Taller than their Genlock cousins, the Hurlocks are roughly of human size, but are possessed of considerable strength and constitution. The shock troop of the Darkspawn, a single berserking Hurlock can often be a match for numerous opponents at once. They are known to adorn themselves with roughly carved tattoos to keep track of their kills and deeds, though it is unknown whether or not there is a uniform standard to these markings. Alphas. Alpha Hurlocks are more intelligent and more skilled fighters, often serving as commanders or even generals. Emissaries. Hurlock emissaries have also been known to appear during a Blight. These Darkspawn are the only ones recorded as being capable of human speech and are often capable of employing magic. Article 19. Ogre. Towering over their Darkspawn kin, the massive ogres are a rare sight on the battlefield. Traditionally, they only appear during a Blight, but some records claim that ogres have been spotted in the deep roads hunting alone or in small groups. At least one report by the Grey Wardens claims that an ogre was spotted alone in the Korcari Wilds in 919 Dragon, though it was weakened and easily dispatched. Up to 100 of these creatures can accompany a Darkspawn horde at any one time during a Blight, often using their great strength to burst through the fortifications and demolish the front lines of the opposing army. They use brute force to charge their enemies like bulls, slam the ground with their fists to shake enemies off their feet, and hurl giant rocks into the face of oncoming foes. Melee can be difficult against a giant that snatches a warrior up in one hand, crushing the life out of him or beating him into oblivion with the other hand. The nimble can try to wiggle his way free, or an ally can attempt an array of stunning blows to an ogre to free the comrade in danger. Grey Warden lore urges caution when slaying an ogre. Unless it is ensured that they have received a major wound to the head or the heart, it is possible that they are lying dormant and will regenerate to full health within a matter of minutes. During a Blight, most Grey Wardens recommend burning all Darkspawn ashes, dead ogres in particular. Article 24. Shade. It has often been suggested that the only way for a demon to affect the world of the living is by possessing a living, or once living, body. But this is not always true. Indeed, a shade is one such shaped creature. That is one such creature. A demon in its true form that has adapted to affect the world around it. My hypothesis is this. We already know that many demons become confused when they pass through the veil into our world. They are unable to tell the living from the dead, the very static nature of our universe being confusing to a creature that is accustomed to a physicality defined entirely by emotion and memory. Most demons seek to immediately seize upon anything they perceive as life, jealously attempting to possess it. But what of those that do not? What of those that encounter no life or fail to possess a body? What of those that are more cautious by their nature? These demons watch. They lurk. They envy. In time, such a demon will learn to drain energy from the psyche of those it encounters, just as it did in the Fade. Once it has drained enough, it has the power to manifest and will forever be known as a shade. Such a creature spurns possession. It instead floats as a shadow across its piece of land, preying upon the psyche of any who cross its path. Perhaps it believes itself still in the Fade? There is evidence to believe this is so. A shade will weaken the living by its very proximity. If it focuses its will, it can drain a single target very quickly. Some have even been known to assault the minds of a living victim, causing confusion or horror, and making the target ripe for the kill. The tragedy of a shade is perhaps that, once it has drained a target whole, its appetite is only heightened rather than slaked. From the journal of a former senior enchanter Malus, once of the Circle of Ravane, declared apostate in 920 Dragon Age. And finally, Article 33, Mabari Dominance. Mabari hounds are descended from pack hunters, and like their ancestors, they are highly influenced by a defined order of dominance. The primary method of determining that order is by claiming territory through scent marking major landmarks. Once established, the dominant Mabari gains a substantial increase in confidence and stature within his territory, a trait that indirectly benefits master as well as hound. Items. Article 36. Havard's Aegis. Havard was Maferath's closest friend. They were children together in the same Avar clan. They fought side by side in so many battles that Maferath dubbed him Havard the Aegis, better to have at his side than any shield. Maferath brought Havard with him to meet with the Tevinters. It was unthinkable to stand before his enemies without his Aegis. When he understood that Maferath was giving Andraste over to be executed, Havard, unwilling to draw swords against his friend and liege, placed himself between Andraste and the Tevinter soldiers. The Tevinters struck him down, and Maferath left him for dead. But Aegis was not so easily destroyed. Havard lived, and made his way, gravely wounded, to the gates of Minrathous to stop the execution. Too late. He found only the ashes of the prophet left to the wind and rain. When his fingers touched the ash, his ears filled with song, and he saw a vision of Andraste, dressed in cloth of starlight. She knelt at his side, saying, "Rise, Aegis of faith. The Maker shall never forget you so long as I remember." His wounds healed instantly, and with new strength, Havard gathered up Andraste's remains and carried them safely back to the land of the Alamari. Number 49. Article number 49. Thorn of the Dead Gods. In the moment that it struck, the blade of the Grey Warden who killed Toth, Archdemon of Fire, shattered into three pieces. Blah. Let me start that again. In the moment that it struck, the blade of the Grey Warden who killed Toth, the Archdemon of Fire, shattered into 3 pieces. Not a million. 3 pieces. After the Battle of Hunterfell, the Warden carried their fallen brother to Weishaupt for a hero's burial. But the broken pieces of his sword were left behind. For years, the shards lay forgotten on the battlefield. Steel became etched with the corrupted blood of the dead god. They were eventually discovered by a Navarin woman searching among the bones for a sign of her lost son. She sold them to a blacksmith, not knowing what they truly were, for 10 bits. The smith, however, knew that he had purchased more than scrap metal, and fashioned the shards into 3 identical daggers, the thorns of the dead gods. They left his hands and were scattered to the far corners of Thedas, but everywhere they went, the thorns left misery and loss in their wake. The woman who unearthed them died soon after of plague. The smith fell into his forge. Each person who has held one of the thorns, even briefly, has died an untimely death. Magic and Religion. Article number 68. The Maker. There was no word, for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky, all that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word, and his word became all that might be, dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities, and from it made his firstborn, and he said to them, My image I forge you, in my image I forge you, to you I give dominion over all that exists, by your will may all things be done. Then in the center of heaven he called forth a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne, and sang hymns of praise unending, but their songs were the songs of the cobblestones. They shone with golden light, reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew out of their own, and the voice of the Maker shook the fade, saying, In my image I have wrought, my firstborn, you have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will all things are done, yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever-changing. And he knew he had wrought amiss, so the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took them from the fade, a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, Here I decree opposition in all things, for earth, sky, for winter, summer, for darkness, light. By my will alone is balance sundered, and the world is given new life. But no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. At last did the Maker from the living world make men, immutable as the substance of the earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, To you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the fade I crafted you, and to the fade you shall return, each night in dreams, that you may always remember me. And then the Maker sealed the gates of the Golden City, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. Thronades 5:1-8. Article 70. The Imperial Chantry. There are those who would tell you that the Chantry is the same everywhere as it is here, that the divine in Val Royeaux reigns supreme in the eyes of the Maker, and that this fact is unquestioned throughout Thedas. Do not believe it. The Maker's second commandment, magic must serve man, not rule over him, has never held the same meaning within the ancient Tevinter Imperium as it did elsewhere. The Chantry there interpreted the rule as meaning that mages should never control the minds of other men, and that otherwise their magic should benefit the rulers of men as much as possible. When the clerics of Tevinter altered the Chant of Light to reflect this interpretation of the commandment, the divine in Val Royeaux ordered the clerics to revert to the original chant. They refused, claiming corruption within Val Royeaux, an argument that grew until, in 487 Towers, the Chantry in Tevinter elected its own legitimate and uncorrupted divine, Valhale, who was not only male, but also happened to be one of the most prominent members of the Tevinter Circle of Magi. This black divine was reviled outside of Tevinter, his existence an offense to the Chantry in Val Royeaux. After 4 exalted marches to dislodge these rebels, all that the Chantry and Valroyo accomplished was to cement the separation. While most aspects of the Imperial Chantry's teachings are the same, prohibitions against magic have been weakened and male priests have become more prevalent. The Circle of the Magi today rules Tevinter directly, ever since the Archon Nomoran was elected in 734 Storm, directly from the ranks of the enchanters, to great applause from the public. He dispensed with the old rules forbidding mages from taking part in politics, and within a century the true rulers within the various imperial houses, the mages, took their places openly within the government. The Imperial Divine is now always drawn from the ranks of the first enchanters, and operates as Divine and Grand Enchanter both. This is utter heresy to any member of the Chantry outside of Tevinter, a return to the days of the Magisters which brought the Blights upon us. But it exists, even though we have left the Tevinter Imperium to the mercies of the dread Kunari. Still they have endured. Further confrontation between the Black Divine and our so-called White Divine is inevitable. From Edicts of the Black Divine by Father David of Canaris, 811 Blessed. Article 91. The Sacred Ashes of Andraste. Only one person witnessed Mafarath's betrayal, Havard the Aegis. A childhood friend of Mafarath, he accompanied his chief to the meeting with the Tevinters, not realizing what was planned. When he understood that Mafarath was giving Andraste over to be executed, Havard, unwilling to draw swords against his friend and liege, placed himself between Andraste and the Tevinter soldiers. The Tevinters struck him down, and Mafarath left him for dead. Gravely wounded, Havard made his way to the gates of Minrathous to stop the execution. When he reached it, the terrible deed was already done, the armies on the plains long since dispersed. Havard, cursing his weakness, gathered the earthly remains of Andraste that had been left to wind and rain, and wept. When his fingers touched the pile of ash, his ears filled with song, and he saw before him a vision of Andraste, dressed in cloth made of starlight. She knelt at his side, saying, "The Maker shall never forget you so long as I remember." The song faded, and the vision with it, and Havard was alone, but his wounds were healed. With new strength, Havard gathered up the ashes of Our Lady, and bore them back to the lands of the Alamari. Fearing that Mafarath's supporters would defile them, Havard took the ashes of Andraste to a secluded place high in the mountains, and there he carved from the living rock an urn to hold them. Time passed, and the whereabouts of the urn faded from memory. Perhaps it was the Maker's will that only the most worthy should find his beloved's final resting place. Now we have only the legends, such as that of the Chevalier Lothering, who quested to find the urn to save his dying daughter, and either found it in time to cure her, or returned 100 years after her death. The ballads end less than certain on that point. From Thedas, Myths and Legends by Brother Genetivi. Culture and History. The history of the Drydens. In the years following the siege of Soldier's Peak, all those who carried the Dryden name were hunted by King Arlen's forces. Our noble Dryden name was smeared, and all lands and holdings belonging to the Drydens were seized by the crown. The king feared that the rebellion started by Sophia would be kept alive by her loyal friends and family, and anyone with connections to the Drydens suffered greatly. It is little wonder, then, that the few remaining Drydens found themselves with no allies and nowhere to turn. Tobin Dryden, Sophia's brother and guardian of her young son, had no choice but to flee Ferelden. Tobin bought passage to Antiva on a merchant vessel and travelled under the name de Rocher. Once in Antiva, Tobin set about building a new, quiet life for himself and his nephew. He started a small business and eventually made a name for himself as a trader. The de Rocher merchant family prospered, and the name Dryden was almost forgotten. However, in 815 Blessed, Sylvie de Rocher uncovered old documents belonging to Tobin and pieced together the family's history. In her pride and perhaps her naivety, Sylvie claimed the name Dryden and returned to Ferelden. King Ireland lies dead, and the Dryden name lives on. Our family has survived, even thrived, since the death of Sophia Drydan. The nobles of Ferelden may still spit upon the Dryden name, but we Drydens know that Sophia Drydan was greater than them, almost a queen, and a hero of the people of Ferelden. From the personal files of Levi Dryden, merchant. Article 109. The Chasind. The Chasind Wilders have lived in the Korkari wilds since the first wars with the Alamari drove them southward a millennium ago. According to their own lore, they have always been a forest-dwelling people that adapted quickly to their new home. Game and fish are plentiful in the wetlands, and the Chasind thrived. For a time, they and the hill-dwelling Avars were true threats to the northern lowlands. The Tevinter Imperium had arrived and was hard-pressed to keep back the waves of invasions from the south and the west. The fortress of Ostagar was built specifically to watch for Chasind hordes venturing north of the tree line. It was not until the legendary warrior Havard soundly defeated the Chasind in the first half of the Divine Age that the question of their ability to contest the lowlands was settled permanently. Today the Chasind are considered largely peaceful, though their ways are still primitive compared to our own. In the Korkari wilds, they live in strange-looking huts built on stilts or even built into the great treetops. They paint their faces and are split into small tribes ruled by shamans like those amongst the Avars. There are many tales of these shamans having learned their magic from the witches of the wilds, witches that inspire as much terror as they do awe and gratitude, even if there is no definitive proof they exist. In particular, the tale of Flemeth, the greatest witch of the wilds, is celebrated among all the tribes. While there is no way to know how many there are in the wilds today, few travelers that pass through the forest tell of Chasinds eking out an existence even in the frozen wastelands of the far south. One can assume that should the Chasind ever organize themselves once more, we might have a reason to fear them here in Ferelden. We ignore them at our peril. From Ferelden, Folklore and History, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Article 120. Dogs in Ferelden. I am frequently asked during my travels in other lands to explain the dogs omnipresent in Ferelden. Inevitably, I tell my foreign questioners that there are no more dogs in my homeland than there are in their own. In every civilized corner of Thedas, an astute observer will notice dogs employed in hunting game, keeping barns and storehouses free of vermin, herding livestock, guarding homes, and even used as beasts of burdens in the mountains. It is simply that Fereldans show appreciation for the work that our dogs do. And perhaps the reason for that is tangled up in mythology. Havard, the first man to be named Teagan, the hero who united our Alamari ancestors to drive back the darkspawn of the Second Blight, was reputed to be the son of a werewolf. Now perhaps this was meant to be some comment on his temperament, or simply a way of making a great man even larger than life. But more than half of the noble families of Ferelden claim to be descendants of Havard, and consequently, many of our people believe that they have some distant kinship with wolves. It is only good manners to be polite to one's kin. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genitivi. Article 128. Lothering. In ancient times, Lothering was little more than a trading post that served the fortress of Ostagar to the south. Nowadays it is larger, serving Redcliffe and the community of merchants and surface dwarves near Orzammar. Its location on the North Road gives it strategic value, so control of Lothering has historically been a matter of contention between the southern Bannorn and the South Reach Arling. King Cailan had himself stepped in and awarded the town to Southreach in the Exalted Age, which has largely ended the feud, or at least the appearance of it. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Characters. Article 163. Queen Anora. We have been given the gift of freedom by our forebearers. Let us not squander it. The only child of the war hero Loghain Mac Tir, Anora has never been one to stay quietly in the background. It is common knowledge that the 5 years Anora and Cailan have held the throne together, she was the one wielding the power. She is held in much higher esteem than her husband by the people of Ferelden, nobility and commoners alike, and commands the respect of even of foreign nations, having once inspired Empress Celine of Orlais to declare, Anora of Ferelden is a solitary rose among the brambles. Article 165. King Cailan Theirin. I'd hoped for a war like in the tales, a king riding with fabled grey wardens against a tainted god. Son of the legendary King Merrick Theirin, Cailan was the first Ferelden king born into a land free from foreign rule in 2 generations. Since his father's death, he's held the throne alongside his queen Anora. He fell in battle alongside Duncan at Ostagar. Article 166. Sir Cauthrien. Some of us know what honor and loyalty are. Cauthrien came to Loghain's service the hard way. She belonged to a poor family and was out doing work on the farm when she saw a man on horseback being attacked by several bandits. She rushed to his assistance and found out belatedly that the man she saved was none other than the great hero Loghain. Though she was hardly more than a child, he took her in, offering her a position with his soldiers, and she climbed through the ranks through sheer determination. Becoming the commander of Merrick's shield, Loghain's elite soldiers, was the proudest moment of her life. Article 168. Harley. The Mabari is clever enough to speak and wise enough to know not to. Ferelden proverb. Varia found this Mabari in the camp at Ostagar. His master was killed in the wilds, and Harley fell ill from biting the darkspawn in battle. Harley seems to have chosen Faria as his new master now, seeking Faria out after the battle at Ostagar, and warning of an impending darkspawn attack. Article 169. Duncan. He was killed in battle against overwhelming numbers of darkspawn at Ostagar, alongside King Cailan. Article 170. Arl Eamon Guerrin. Nobility does not exist without obligation. We owe all we have, even our lives, to our land and our people. As the maternal uncle of King Cailan, Arl Eamon is one of the king's most trusted advisors. Redcliffe, while not a large or especially wealthy part of Ferelden, is a critical strategic location. The fortress guards the western pass that leads to Orlais, as well as the major trade route with Orzammar. A well-respected man, though not the most charismatic, King Cailan once said of him, "My uncle Eamon is a man everyone thinks well of, when they remember to think of him at all." He fell ill with a mysterious condition that even magic could not treat. Article 172. Flemeth. You are required to do nothing, least of all believe. Ages ago, legend says Bann took to wife a beautiful young woman who harbored a secret talent for magic, Flemeth of Havard. And for a time they lived happily until the arrival of a young poet, Osen, who captured the lady's heart with his verse. They turned to the Chasind tribes for help and hid from Conobar's wrath in the wilds until word came to them that Conobar lay dying. His last wish was to see Flemeth's face one final time. The lovers returned, but it was a trap. Conobar killed Osen and imprisoned Flemeth in the highest tower of the castle. In grief and rage, Flemeth worked a spell to summon a spirit into this world to wreak vengeance upon her husband. Vengeance she received, but not as she planned. The spirit took possession of her, turning Flemeth into an abomination. A twisted, maddened creature, she slaughtered Conobar and all his men, and fled back into the wilds. For 100 years Flemeth plotted, stealing men from the Chasind to sire monstrous daughters, horrific things that could kill a man with fear. These Kokari witches led an army of Chasind from the wilds to strike at the Almari tribes. They were defeated by the hero Cormac, and all the witches were burned, so they say. But even now the Wilders whisper that Flemeth lives on in the marsh, and she and her daughters steal those men who come too near. Morrigan's mother saved the last Grey Wardens from death at the top of the Tower of Ishal, but just who or what Flemeth truly is a mystery. Article 179, Leliana. In the cloister, away from the fuss and the flurry of the cities, I found peace, and in that stillness I could hear the Maker. A lay sister of the Chantry who can beat the stuffing out of trained mercenaries would be notable enough, but one who also claims to have been sent to fight the Darkspawn by the Maker himself is unusual, to say the least. She joined Alistair and Faria in Lothering, insisting that she would prove useful. Article 180, Loghain Mac Tir. Understand this. I will brook no threat to this nation, from you or anyone. Loghain was born during a time when his country was under foreign occupation. When he was still a boy, he joined the resistance, where his considerable tactical genius quickly became apparent. He became close friends with Prince Marek, the last true heir to the Ferelden throne, and together they led the rebels to drive out the forces of the Orlesian Empire. Marek raised his friend to the nobility, and Loghain is now more of a symbol than a man. He represents the Ferelden ideals of hard work and independence. During the battle at Ostagar, he fled the field, leaving King Cailan and the Grey Wardens to die. He then returned to Denerim and declared himself the regent to his daughter, Queen Anora, demanding that Ferelden follow him against the Darkspawn, upsetting a great many of the bands. Article 181, Morrigan. Witch of the Wilds. Such idle fancies, those legends. Have you no minds of your own? Of herself, Morrigan says little. She does not deny being a witch of the wilds, but beyond that, everything about her is in question. Her mother claims to be Flemeth. If that's true, the Morrigan might very well be a powerful witch, for the tales of the daughters of Flemeth tell of twisted, monstrous women who can kill men with fear. She was made to accompany the surviving Grey Wardens, the payment, Flemeth said, for saving their lives at the Tower of Ishal. Article 184, Sten. Either you have an enviable memory or a pitiable life, to know nothing of regret. The northern islands are remote, lush jungles that harbor cities rumored to be the most extraordinary ever built. These are the lands of the Canari, lands that no foreign eyes ever see. Only the stories of the 3 exalted marches waged against the giants have reached the south. Until the arrival of Sten. The stoic giant in the cage was surely the strangest thing the people of Lothering had ever seen, until the Blight struck. Article 185, Bann Teagan Guerrin. The Bannorn will not bow to you simply because you demand it. Younger brother to Arl Eamon of Redcliffe and uncle to King Cailan, Teagan holds the Bannorn of Rainsfair, a tiny province of Redcliffe squeezed between the Frostback Mountains and Lake Calenhad. Bann Teagan avoids the Denerim court except to go hunting with his nephew, and rarely makes himself heard at the Landsmeet, preferring to leave politics to his brother. And lastly, in characters, Article 191, Sophia Drydan. Sophia Drydan is Ferelden's light and her most brilliant jewel. Nothing on this earth can ever quench her fire. Arlessa Sophia Drydan was the young Arlen's rival for the throne of Ferelden. Drydan was a strong and charismatic leader with much support from the Bannorn. When Arlen finally won the crown, Drydan refused to relent. She pushed her claim, was caught, and accused of treason. Her sympathizers continued to support her, however. In order to appease them, Drydan was spared execution and forced to join the Grey Wardens instead. Drydens survived the joining and dazzled the Grey Wardens at Soldier's Peak with her leadership skills and charm. She eventually rose through the ranks to become the Warden Commander of Ferelden. Before Commander Dryden, the Grey Wardens were seen as a relic of an older time and an unnecessary drain on the nobles' coffers. Dryden, though, with her political connections, reinvigorated the Wardens and rapidly increased their numbers. In the meantime, King Arland proved himself a devious king, willing to go to brutal lengths to silence his opponents. Arland's reign of terror grew worse with each passing year, and some of the bands approached Commander Dryden in desperation, begging her to intercede. She agreed, and thus was the rebellion against King Arland born. Arland learned of the rebellion and took steps to end it. He publicly suspended all tithing to the Grey Wardens and declared that they were no longer welcome in Ferelden. Some of the Wardens, mindful that they were supposed to remain politically neutral, felt disgraced by Dryden's involvement in Ferelden politics and left her side even as the king's forces lay siege to Soldier's Peak. The siege took months and ended with the death of Sophia Drydan. From the personal files of Levi Dryden, merchant. And finally, from Books and Songs, Article 211, The First Blight, Chapter 1. Thedas is a land of fierce diversity, from the assassin princes of Antiva to the fated griffins of the Anderfells, but in my travels I have found one tale that unites the people of this land. It is a story of pride and damnation, and although the telling differs, the essence of the tale remains the same. At the height of its power, the Tevinter Imperium stretched over much of Thedas, uniting the known world under the rule of the tyrannical Magisters. It is said that the old gods whom the Magisters worshipped gave them the knowledge of blood magic, and the Magisters used this forbidden power to cement their rule. The blood of elven slaves and human alike ran down imperial altars to fuel the Magister greed, and the tales of their excesses so horrifying that one can only be grateful that blood magic is prohibited today. But all that stands tall must eventually fall. Perhaps they foresaw their ruin, or perhaps their pride knew no bounds. But whatever the reason, the Magisters dared to open a magical portal into the Golden City at the heart of the Fade. They sought to usurp the Maker's throne, long left unattended in the Golden City after the Maker turned his back on his creations. They would storm heaven itself with their power and become as gods. This is what the Chantries in its oft-exercised tendency to understate, refers to as the second sin. According to most versions of the tale, the Magisters did indeed reach the Golden City and walked into the home of the Maker, where no living being before them had dared, or been able, to tread. But humanity is not meant to walk in heaven. The Magisters were wicked with pride and other sins, and their presence tainted the Golden City. What was once a perfect, holy citadel became a twisted home of darkness and nightmares. The Magisters were expelled back through their gateway and cursed for their treachery. As the Golden City had been tainted, so were the Magisters twisted and transformed into things of darkness, the very first of the Darkspawn. The Golden City, once a shining beacon at the heart of the Fade, became the Black City, a reminder of all that man's pride had cost. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Heavy stuff. But that's all for now. Thank you for joining me for this second Codex reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.